Don't be bashful. Let's go. Where's the regular standing?
Didn't take your shoes off, they're hurt.
Not a bad idea. Good to see everybody here this morning. There was a man that once had been driving all night. He was a salesman, had been out on the road, and he was on his way back home, but he was a good distance away, and he was trying to make it back. And he just knew that he had to stop and rest. He was exhausted. As he was coming into a town, he thought he'd find a place that he could just pull over and catch an hour's nap to refresh him to get back on the road. He did not know that whenever the place that he pulled his nice little park there, and did not know that whenever he got there that was one of the busiest places for joggers. And so he pulled in where he was, and he kind of laid the seat back a little bit and just dozed off when there was on his window, startled him. He rolled down the window, and a jogger poked his head in there and goes, "Sir, excuse me, but can you tell me what time it is?" And he looked at his clock. He said, "It's 8:15. And he said, "Okay, sorry, thank you," and went on about his jogging. The guy rolled his window back up, thought, well, see if I can do this again. He no more than dozed off when he hears another one of them cotton-picking joggers. And he rolls down the window, and the lady says, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me what time it is?" He said, "It's 8:25, thank you," and went on her way. He said, about this time he's seen more joggers showing. He said, "I'm not going to be able to get any rest unless I do something." So he writes out a note on a piece of paper, "I do not know what the time is," and taped it up on his window. Laid back down. A few seconds later, he rolls down the window. The person stuck his head in and says, "Sir, it's 8:30. Time is what we're talking about here today. Now, I want to ask you a question as we get started this morning. How many of you have heard of Sweet Brown? Some of you are holding up your hands. You know who I'm talking about. Sweet Brown is an Oklahoma City resident. And she was interviewed by a television station last year in April of 2012. She was in her apartment building when all of a sudden there was a chaotic scene that ensued. The apartment complex caught on fire. Now, and it was, it wasn't a good thing, obviously. There was one person that had to be taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. A lot of people were displaced. But the people of America got to know who Sweet Brown is. And she did an interview talking about the television station, I think it's Channel 4 out of St. Louis, Oklahoma City, showed up and they interviewed her about what was going on. And Taylor, if you've got the video, here is what she said. Give it a second here to load up.
He first realized the complex was on fire. Well, I woke up to go get me a cold pop, and then I thought somebody was barbecuing. I said, "Oh Lord Jesus, it's a fire." Then I ran out. I didn't grab no shoes or nothing, Jesus. I ran for my life. And then the smoke got me. I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Now, she is a YouTube sensation. Last time I looked, over 12 million people had checked out Sweet Brown on YouTube. Now, I want to tell you right now, if you have not seen the remix, they have put that to music, and it's a pretty bumping piece. Go to YouTube when you get home and type in on YouTube Sweet Brown and watch the remix. It is bumping, baby. I started to play the whole thing, and I thought, no, we'll get out of control here. There's a revival breaking out in the Baptist church. But I'm telling you, go check it out. It is worth it. Now, if that made you smile or laugh, even with the bad stuff that happens surrounding that, then you can see why she has become a favorite with a lot of people. She's become real well known through that. Because of that catchphrase. Ain't nobody got time for that. And that's what we're talking about here today. We are busy people. It seems no matter what the time of the year is, we find ourselves busy. You know, in the wintertime, well, I got stuff to do. Whenever it gets a little warmer, I'll take care of that. It gets a little warmer. What do we say? Well, it's just too hot for that right now. I'll put it off to this little cooler. It's a vicious cycle that we go through. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Sometimes the time just ain't right. Ain't nobody got time for that. It's become a big catchphrase that people are using. Just because we're busy doesn't mean that we're busy getting things done for the kingdom of God. Just because we're around people does not necessarily mean that we are influencing them for eternal or spiritual matters. It doesn't mean that we are connecting with people for Jesus. What happens when there ain't nobody got time for that extends to others? What happens? Or more, or maybe the important things that we think are important, or work that needs to be done urgently, or what happens to those causes that are really worth fighting for if we have that attitude? Time is precious. Have you ever heard that one before? I bet you've heard it a million times. Time is precious. Time can be stolen. Time can be lost. Time can be wasted. Let me ask you a couple of questions. How would you like to spend 2 years making phone calls to people who aren't home? Sound absurd? According to a time management survey recently, that's what they say the average American does. The average American spends 2 years making phone calls to people who aren't even at home. And not only that, we spend 6 months waiting for the traffic light to turn green. I've been on Northwest Avenue. I'm in that category right there. And we spend another 8 months on average reading junk mail. There's no shortage of that. Now, sure, we have got to take time at the traffic light if you don't want to get in trouble or get in an accident. We've got to stop there. We've got to sometimes return those telephone calls. But what about the rest of our time that we have? Are we using it to advance the cause of Jesus? Are we using it, if we call ourselves Christians, to be doing the things that we have been called to do? Is our time well spent? Are we using it in a way that is pleasing to God? I'm going to ask you to stand this morning as we look at our text here this morning. We are in the book of Ephesians. If you got your Bible, I encourage you to open up to chapter 5 of Ephesians. And we'll be beginning in verse 11. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes light. This is why it is said, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Thank you. You may be seated. Bruce Lee is quoted as saying, if you love life, don't waste time, for time is what life is made of. We know that Bruce Lee died at a very young age, martial arts and movie star expert. There was an article that was posted in USA Today a while back about Mike Tyson, and I found it to be very interesting. Here's what he said. My whole life has been wasted. I've been a failure. Then he went on to say a little bit more. He said, for instance, I just want to escape. I'm really embarrassed with myself and my life. And then he said, I'll never be happy. I believe I'll die alone. I'm really lost, but I'm trying to find myself. But the one thing that got my attention was when he said, my whole life has been a waste. This is Iron Mike, former heavyweight champion of the world, saying some sad things in those statements. He's expressing what a lot of people in this world are expressing about life, and they're living life. There was a group of students who were asked to write some definitions about life. Here's what some of those students said. One said, life is a punishment for the crime of being born. Another student wrote, life is a disease for which the only cure is death. Now, well, a lot of us can remember a song that said, living is what you're doing until you're waiting to die. Kind of a morbid thought, kind of a hopeless thought by what they say. But I fear that that is how a lot of people today see their lives. Have we lost our zeal for life? Are we wasting our time here on this planet that God has put us here at this point in time? Or are we just simply waiting to die as we go through life? Folks, there are several things that we need to realize. One of those that we need to look at today is that our time is limited. I don't think that's any secret. I think you know that. We don't have a lot of time. And we got to use it because it's not going to always be there. Time is precious. It is limited. You know, when something is in short supply, the demand is high. The price goes up. The more scarce something is, the more valuable it becomes. It's just that simple. You know, gold and diamonds wouldn't be so valuable if it was just they were just as common as the gravel in your driveway or out there on that parking lot. But the demand is high because they're scarce. Time would not be so precious if we never died, but we do. James 4:14 says there on your screen, "Why you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." Kansas rock group several years ago had a song called "Dust in the Wind." And that's basically what we are. We're dust in the wind. The reality is that the life in this world will come to an end. Each and every one of us will experience our own death. Unless the Lord comes back first, we're all going to experience death. But for many of us, we live like that's never going to happen. You know, we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof in our own minds. Unless Jesus comes before I die, I'm going to die. And so are you. It's that simple. How many of you ever heard of the Amazing Randy? Anybody ever heard of him? He was a stage magician. He was a mentalist, if you will, and an escape artist, kind of like what Houdini was. And he was pretty good at what he does. He once escaped from a big, giant block of ice. That's what he does. It's on his business card. He escapes from blocks of ice. He also one time was held upside down. He was tied up over Niagara Falls, and he got out of that predicament. He had the world, I don't know if he still does or not, at one time he had the world record for being submerged in a coffin without, getting air for over 2 hours in a pool of water. Who grows up wanting to do that? I don't know. But that's what he did. But the reason I bring up the Amazing Randy was he had a routine that he went through every day. He would wake up every morning, he would reach into his pocket and would pull out a piece of paper. On that piece of paper, it would say, "My name is the Amazing Randy," and he would have the day's date, "I am going to die today." Now he would take that out, and every morning he would rip it up, and he would get out a new piece of paper and write in that day's date and put it back in his pocket. So that whenever he did die, his legacy would be, he even predicted his own death. Seems kind of goofy to me, but that's what he wanted. That was important to him. Now what if we all had a sheet of paper that was in our pocket today, and it said something like, "My name is Don Travis, and on May the 19th, 2013, I'm going to die." How many of us would do that? If we did do that, how many of us would really believe it and we would work to be doing what God has called us to do to make a difference in somebody's life? Not just going off on some expedition out, just doing our own thing, but we were actually tending to the lambs, feeding the sheep that Jesus tells us to do in His Word. How many of us would be doing that? You see, I'm kind of shamed by the useless dedication of the Amazing Randy. I don't walk around with morbid thoughts on my mind about death all the time. But I know the chances are pretty strong that I'm going to die one day. And I need to prepare for it. I can't stop it, but I can prepare for it. So our time is limited. Next thing we got to understand that our time is passing. It says in Hebrews 9:27, just as people are destined to die once and after that to face judgment. You can try, as Jim Croce said back, I think it was in 73, you can try to save time in a bottle. You can't do it, folks. You can't just store some away and then go back later on and say, "I'd like to pull out the last 20 years and redo that." It doesn't work that way. There is no fountain of youth. You can make your physical appearance look younger. Plastic surgeons have proved that. I got nothing wrong with that. I really don't. That's what you want to do. But it's not going to make you younger. It might look younger. It doesn't change by diet. I've been trying to diet, to exercise. Folks, I got to brag. Time out. These pants, Robin bought them for me a while back. I couldn't fit them. 2 months ago, I couldn't fit in these pants. I'm fitting in these pants. But the deal, thank you. I didn't mean that as a But I'll take it. But even with the exercising and the dieting, it's not going to make me live, longer than what God has purposed for me to be. I would like to say that I'm middle-aged, but unless I'm going to die at 112 years old, I ain't middle-aged. We can, however, control how we spend the time that God has blessed us with while we are still living on this earth. So my question to you is, how are you spending the time that He has blessed you with right now? What are you doing with your life? Are you doing what He has purposed for you to be doing? Now understand, you only get one life. You don't get two. I don't care what's her name? Shirley MacLaine? Well, she's one of those. Oh, we'll come back. I've been Cleopatra in a former life. No, ain't gonna work like that. Nobody gets two lives, two physical lives. This morning, this moment would be a really good time for you to get that nail down in your head and deal with that question, because life goes by so quickly. Talking about Jessica, I can remember I remember whenever she went to, Casey took some kids to church camp at Beach Springs. I still got that picture, Jessica, of her holding up a fish about that big that she caught. And she was just a little old tyke back then. It happens so fast. Time just rolls through. How many of you over 50 years old age would agree with that? It rolls by pretty fast. Now, wouldn't you agree with me that life is unspeakably precious and unbelievably short? Since life is so precious and so short, it's really insane to waste the time that we have been blessed with on stupid things. Like being consumed about what other people think about us. It's really dumb. Kids, don't worry about what other people think about you. How you believe, how you love them. Don't be concerned with that. Just be who God has called you to be. It's dumb to be consumed with a hatred for another person, just going through your life, just wishing that a meteorite would fall out of the sky and just obliterate them. It's too short to go through life thinking things like that. Or being afraid of our own shadow. Being afraid of what the future's going to hold. If we are Christians, if we are Christ followers, and we know that He has given us eternal life through our belief and faith in Him, what are we afraid of? Maybe some people are just consumed with cynicism and negativity, and they're just always looking for something. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something bad's going to happen. I just know it. And they find themselves almost wishing that it would happen so they can just go ahead and get it over with, instead of enjoying the beauty that God has put around us. Many of you know who Tim McGraw is. He's a North Louisiana boy. Found out later in life that his dad was baseball pitcher Tug McGraw. And he describes how his father caused him to reevaluate his life. After learning the news, he's talking about the dad who's got a limited amount of time left. You know how the song goes probably. He says he went skydiving, went Rocky Mountain climbing, went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. He said, I loved deeper and I spoke sweeter and I gave forgiveness I've been denied. And he said, someday I hope that you will live like you were dying. Man, those are profound words. There's a lot of country music that's got some bad theology in it. That's pretty good stuff right there. Time is passing, and you're not ever going to be able to get it back. There's no rewind button. There's no pause button. There's nothing that you or I could ever do to regain time. But time waits for no man. Our time is passing. Our time is passing, and our time is uncertain. Did you hear about the three guys one time that they were at a funeral, and after it's over, they got around talking about what kind of a legacy they'd like to leave. And one of them says, "Well, I'd like to be known as a good humanitarian, that I love my community and I gave back to it." He looked over, the other guy said, "What do you want to be remembered for?" He said, "I'd like to be remembered as a good father and a good husband, somebody that everybody else could look up to." Man, that's pretty good. They looked at the third guy and said, "What do you want people to say at your funeral?" He said, "I want them to say, look, he's moving." We don't know the day. And here's the sad. I have been around when doctors have given somebody a prognosis that that person is going to die in a very short time, and then they live for an extended amount of time, just boggling everybody's mind. I've been around people who all of a sudden had just died. Get that phone call or somebody we wasn't expecting, that somebody has passed away. It seems only God knows, and He does. He is the only one that knows, really, when a person is destined to die. Proverbs 27:1 says, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." There are thousands of people, just since you have awakened this morning in this world, that have already died. They have already passed on. These are people that yesterday had no idea that that was going to be the last full day that they enjoyed. And a lot of these folks were younger than you and I. And I wonder what they would have spent doing yesterday differently had they known. It happened so fast. I have told people, especially on our Sunday night and Wednesday night studies, that I carry a certain amount of guilt, and I know that's bad. But in my mom's family, she has her 2 sisters, and between the 3 of them, there were 6 grandchildren. 3 boys, 3 girls. And of those 6, I am the only boy that's left, the only male that's left. And many of y'all have grieved with me on the fact that just a couple of years ago, my cousin Brad dropped at 40 years old on his birthday. Died. Staggered into the hospital and fell over dead. My other cousin Jeff, who was a gift from God to people, who was as musically talented as the world, started off as his church organist and eventually became the church music director. He was blessed in a lot of ways. Died at the age of 33 years old. And I told one of my aunts about that guilt that I feel. And why has God chosen me to be the one that's left over? We never know when God's going to say, your time is finished. It's time to come to me. Our time on earth is limited. It's uncertain. And I believe that we can easily lose time by doing nothing. Just sitting back and just let the world come to me. That's not what we are called to do as Christians. General William Nelson was a Union general back in the Civil War. And he was consumed with all the battles that were raging in the state of Kentucky. That's where he was. That's where his campaign was. And he ended up getting shot during a brawl. This is a man that saw a battle and saw it up close. And there was some downtime. They were in a house. At least he was. He'd set up his office in a house, and he was upstairs when he was shot because 2 of his men downstairs got into an argument. They shot and went up through the ceiling where he was, and it mortally wounded him, and he knew he was dying. And you know what his last request was? He said, send for a clergyman. He basically said, I want to be baptized. What he really meant was, I need to know the Lord. This was a guy that didn't have time for God whenever he was a young man. He went into the army, became a private, didn't have time for God then. He went up through the ranks and became a general, still didn't have time for God. But you know what? After all that was happening, the battles were still going on. The war still went on for a while. Those things had been a priority to him. But at that moment, his priorities shifted pretty dramatically. He wanted a clergyman to come and to talk to him about Jesus. 30 minutes after that, he was dead. There's a lot of things in this world that you can lose and get back. But folks, time is not one of them. The minute a moment is gone, gone forever. Some of you remember the soap opera Days of Our Lives. Is that still on? Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Time comes only to be gone in an instant. Jesus said in John 9, "For as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work." In other words, time is limited. We have been blessed with a certain amount of time on this planet to do God's work. Saw a sign on a church in town. You might have seen it. Will anybody be in heaven because of you? Because you went and you did what God has called you to do, to be a witness to somebody else so that they can spend eternity in heaven. Jesus realized that he had a short time on this earth, and we do too. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the day to follow Jesus. Today is the day we tell ourselves that we got time for that. And realize that we do have time. And what we have time for. It's time we realize that we are in a world that's full of danger. And if we sit back and remain complacent, we'll get burned and we'll lose it all. Now, one of the things that we can say about Sweet Brown is that she didn't waste any time. She knew what the situation was, and she boogity got out of that apartment. She woke up and just thought it was going to be a regular day. She was going to get her a nice cold pop. And then realized the place was on fire. It wasn't barbecue she was smelling. She didn't grab her shoes or nothing. She didn't allow the smoke of her bronchitis to stop her. She realized that all them things that might have seemed important earlier on wasn't that important after all. She came out on the other side of danger with a smile on her face and has become well known in this country. And a lot of you are aware of her now who might not have known who Sweet Brown was. Right now, at this very moment, you've got time. Here's our application. We have time to do something for Jesus. That's what we're called for. To be His messengers. You are called to be a missionary if you're a Christian. You are called to be a minister if you are a Christian. It does not mean that you're called to preach, but you go and you minister to other people. We have got to have time for Jesus and the things of Him. The question is, folks, listen to me. Here's the question. You've got time right now. Can you guarantee you're going to have time tomorrow? Let's stand. Bow your heads, close your eyes.